Hi folks, and welcome to the 7th video in my Getting Started series for the game B-17 Flying Fortress The Mighty Eighth. Now in this video I'm going to run through training mission number 4, that is bombing under good weather conditions. Now I'm going to repeat this training mission and give you 5 examples. Don't worry though, I'm not going to subject you to the full bomb run every time, only on the first example of the training mission. I'm including the other examples to show you how to start the bomb run manually, as well as to illustrate the effect of 1. Adjusting the intervalometer, which controls the time period between each bomb being released, and 2. Using the salvo switch. Now in the first example of the training mission, I'm going to let the AI set up the bombardier's instrument panel and to lock onto the target. The only thing I'm going to do manually is I'm going to show you how to adjust for drift and rate to stay locked on the target. In the second example of the training mission, I'm actually going to manually set up the bombardier's instrument panel and show you how to manually lock onto the target. I'm also going to reduce the intervalometer setting to 250 milliseconds, which is half of the default that would have been used in the first example of this training mission. In the third example, I'm simply going to reduce the intervalometer down to 100 milliseconds so that I can illustrate to you the difference in the bombing pattern that results from that. Similarly, in the fourth example, I'm going to reduce the intervalometer setting further. I'm going to take it down to its minimum of 10 milliseconds, again to show you how the bombing pattern changes. And in the final and fifth example, I'm actually going to use the salvo switch instead of the intervalometer, and I'm going to turn the salvo switch on. And that would be effectively the same as setting the intervalometer to 0. Not that you can do that, you use a salvo switch to do that. Okay, so without further ado, let's get cracking. So to get started on training mission number 4, we click on the new game panel on the top left and the continue switch in the lower right. We then click on the choose a training mission panel on the right hand side here, and then on the continue switch on the lower right. And then we'll scroll down the training mission list here, and we're going to select training mission number 4, bombing good conditions. As it says down here, in this mission you must fly a mission to a target and bomb it. The weather is favourable, the altitude is low, and there is no flak or fighter opposition to jog your elbow. The bomber starts on the bomb run with no obstructions to the target, and this is a fine introduction to the workings of the Northern bomb sight. So let's go ahead and start the first example of training mission number 4, and we'll do that by left clicking on the play selected mission switch here in the lower right.
Join formation. New heading is 186. Repeat, 186.
So before we do anything else, let's get our bearings by going to the navigator station by pressing the number 1 key at the top of the keyboard. And we can see here that our B-17 is still approaching the initial point, so we're not yet on the bomb run. And if we move down the bomb run here, we can see our target indicated by this green circle on the ground. And above that bombing target, we have a red bomb, and a red bomb indicates that that is our primary bombing target. Now we're flying at around 8,000 feet. And 150 miles per hour. And I'm actually going to hide this overlay because it can actually get in the way when you're on the bomb run. So I'm going to hide that by holding down Control on my keyboard and tapping H. Now I'm going to go back to the bombardier station by pressing the key to the left of the number 1 at the top of my keyboard. In my case, that's the back tick key. I'm now going to go to the bombardier's instrument panel by pressing the space bar. Now this is all currently turned off, and that's because we're not on the bomb run. We are waiting for us to reach that initial point, and then the bombardier will take over, the AI bombardier will take over, and he will turn on this panel and get us set up for the bomb run. So we should in a moment see us reaching the waypoint. Get an announcement very shortly. There we go, so we're at the waypoint, and in a second the bombardier will kick in. There we go. So the AI bombardier has turned on the panel. Here's flick the switch to open the bomb bay doors. And now the bomb bay doors are full open, as we heard by that announcement and saw by the message at the bottom of the screen. We've also can tell by this red light having come on. And that indicates that the bomb bay doors have reached their full open position. If you really want to, you can actually visually see that by pressing the F2 key and having a quick look underneath the plane. And there we go, we can see the bomb bay doors are fully open. So I'm going to press the F1 key to go back inside, and the space bar to go back to the instrument panel view. So also on here we can see that here's flick the switch to arm the bombs. It's turned on the autopilot, and that effectively now means that the Norden bomb sight is flying the plane. Each of these 4 bomb rack selector switches are turned on, and that means that all 4 bomb racks will be used and all the bombs from each rack will drop. And those are represented graphically down here. Each bomb rack is a vertical bomb rack, so we've got rack 1, 2, 3 and 4, and each one of the red lights indicates where there is a bomb loaded within that rack. Over to the left here we have the intervalometer, and that is set by default at 500 milliseconds. And I've never seen the AI adjust that. It's always, when the AI bombardier is operating, that never changes. There's also to the right of the intervalometer a salvo switch, which has the effect of setting an interval of 0, so all bombs drop instantaneously. Again, I've never seen the AI actually make use of the salvo switch or the intervalometer, so these are really only used when you're in manual mode if you want to adjust the bombing interval. So let's now press the space bar to go back to the Norden bomb site. I just want to highlight quickly 2 things on here. There's the mission altitude dial. Now if you start a mission and you let the AI start up the bomb run by turning on the instrument panel and lock on target initially, then the AI will also set this mission altitude dial correctly. So in that case you can just leave and forget this item. If you want to do everything manually, as in you take over manual control of the bombardier before the start of the bomb run and you turn on the bombardier's instrument panel, etc., you may need to manually adjust this mission altitude dial. And I'll show you how to do that in the next example of this training mission. The other key item on here is the drift scale and the drift indicator, and I'll show you what this means in a short moment. The other item up here is the viewport for the action view, and the action view also shows you this section of the Norden bomb site, so we'll just go and look at that now by pressing the A key. So we're now in the action view, and we can see the crosshairs which represent where we're currently targeted to drop our bombs, and we can see the dark green circle indicating where our bombing target is located, and we need to bomb within that circle, but ideally as close to the center as possible. And we're actually drifted quite far away from that center point. The AI will have initially set us up at that center point, and we have drifted away from it. Now if you have movement of your crosshair and it drifts either left or right, or it moves either left or right, then that is called drift, and there is a specific way of correcting for drift, and I'll show you that in a moment. We are clearly drifting to the right. If the crosshairs move either vertically up or down, then that is called rate error, and you have to adjust that in this action view, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment. And clearly we have got a rate error which is making the crosshairs move down. So first of all, let's correct for drift, and I always correct for drift first by going to the instrument view by pressing I, and we can see that the drift scale here, that this needle is off to the right, and if we want to actually correct for the error and we want the error to stop us moving to the right, we need to move this needle to the left. So I'm going to do that by holding down the N key on the keyboard, but before I do that, press M to go into manual mode. So now press down N on your keyboard and move the joystick to the left, and I want to set that to the 0 point. That's the only amount of adjustment, I want to make a small amount of adjustment first of all. So press A to go back into the action view. So now I'm actually going to reset this onto the target before I recheck if we have corrected adequately for the drift error. And I do that by going to search mode, and search mode is on when this yellow light is on and this marker block has dropped all the way to the bottom. So you turn on search mode by holding down the shift key and tapping K. The yellow light is on, that block has moved to the bottom. And now I can just freely move the crosshairs using my joystick. And once I get them on target, I'm going to turn off search mode again by pressing shift and K again. Now the search mode light's off and that marker block has moved back up. Now I can check if I have still got any drift error, and I tend to do that by looking at this vertical line here and comparing it to anything on the ground, any kind of geographical feature such as this hedge or trees or whatever, and to see if we've got anything indicating that it is moving either left or right. And it seems to be okay at the moment. Now the other thing to check for is rate, and as we saw before, we've definitely got rate moving the crosshairs down, so we need to correct that by moving this marker block up to counter that. And we move that marker block up by pulling back on the joystick. You don't need to press any keys beforehand, and you don't want to, again, you don't want to make significant changes to these, just small changes each time. So that might be enough. So we want to get back onto target by going into search mode, shift K and shift K again. I'm just going to do that once more, shift K. So now we just need to monitor and check to see if we have any further drift or rate error. Now what I found in this training mission, it does actually cheat. Although I don't think there's any wind modelled, it does keep moving the drift correction. So if I now go to the instrument view, we can see it's actually moved this back over to the right when I set it to 0. So we now need to move that back. In a real bombing mission, it doesn't do this. So that's it back in the center. A to go back to the action view, shift K, get us back onto target, shift K again. It's a bit unfair because it keeps doing this even when you get really close to your target. And ordinarily you would correct for your rate and drift errors as soon as possible in the bomb run. As I say, I always do drift as soon as possible, quite early on in our bomb run, and then rate is best done when you've actually got a bit of a better visual on your actual target itself, and you can have something to compare the horizontal line here against your target, and you can see it moving up or down far more clearly then. We're actually rates coming down, so I'm going to pull back on my joystick a bit to bring us up. When you do actually manage to get rate and drift correct, the error corrections spot on, and you don't see this moving anywhere, you've got it set on target and it's locked, then that's called synchronization. Now when these two markers actually reach each other, that's when the bomb's released. And that right hand marker was actually kind of like an indication of how far away from the target you currently are. So once it's moved up and it gets in line with the left hand marker, that indicates you're actually over your target. So I'm now going to press the F6 key to give us an external view of the bombs falling, and another F6 key to take us to the actual impact on the ground. And you get a very long line of bombs dropping here, and that's because the interval is actually set fairly high at 500 milliseconds. So you can see a lot of bombs fall short of the actual target, and a heck of a lot of bombs fall after the target. So we'll just press F6 to come out of there. Well, we don't need to. The mission has ended, so we'll just now read the mission debriefing. And congratulations, you have displayed the required standard of competence and familiarity with the procedures for using the Norden bomb sight. You have completed this training mission successfully. Yay! So if we left click on this page, you'll get this graphical view every single time you complete a bombing mission, assuming you dropped bombs on your target. Now the black dots indicate where your bombs landed, and the red dots indicate where you have successfully destroyed an individual piece of a target. So in this case, we had 4 successful items destroyed. So that's it. Let's move on to the next example now, where we're actually going to do everything manually, and we'll go from there. So in this second example of training mission number 4, I'm actually going to do everything manually. So we're not going to have the AI do anything in the bomb run. So we're going to have complete manual control from start to finish. I'm also going to reduce the intervalometer setting from its default of 500 milliseconds, and I'm going to bring it down to 250 milliseconds so that you can see the impact on the bombing pattern at the end of the bomb run. So let's get started. So I'm going to left click on play selected mission.
Join formation. Take up a heading of 186. Repeat, 186. Okay.
So similarly, we'll just go to the navigator, and we can see we are still approaching the initial point, so we've got a little bit of time before the bomb run starts. I'm going to go back to the Bombardier's instrument panel by pressing the backtick key to the left of the number 1 and then the space bar. And then I'm going to press M to go into manual mode. Now you have to go into manual mode before you reach the bomb run's initial point. If you don't, then the AI will automatically start the bomb run and set all of this panel up. Now that's no big deal, but for this particular example I really want to show you how to do it all manually. So I'm setting us into manual mode quite early on. And again, as before, I'm going to hide this overlay by pressing Ctrl H. So I'm just going to skip time a second, and once we are ready to start up the panel, I'll be back with you in a moment. Okay, so we're at the waypoint now. That means we are on the bomb run. So I need to turn on the panel. There we go. Open up the bomb bay doors, arm the bombs, turn the Northern Bombsight autopilot on, select the 4 bomb racks, and as I said before, I'm going to reduce the intervalometer setting to 250 milliseconds. So I'm going to left click on here, and I'm moving my mouse to the left and right until I get 250. So there we go. So now we can go to the Northern Bombsight again by pressing the space bar. Now the first thing we need to check is our mission altitude. Now I know we're flying at 8,000 feet. We can double check by bringing the overlay up, Control H. And there we go, 8,000 feet. Control H to take that away again. Now I'm just going to left click on the mission altitude dial, and it is already preset to the correct level, so I don't need to make any adjustments there. So let's have a quick look through the Northern Bombsight viewport, and let's do our setting the crosshairs on our target. Now because we didn't let the AI find the target initially, the crosshairs are in the middle of nowhere, so I need to do the search mode course adjustment, and as you can see the yellow light is already on and that marker block is down at the bottom, so I'm in search mode. And so I need to move my joystick around until I find the target. And maybe I'm being a bit dumb here. I'm actually struggling to find it. This actually demonstrates the benefit of having the AI lock on the target, because if you have any cloud cover, it can be extremely difficult to find the target initially. And so what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to cheat slightly here. I'm just going to press the M key to go into AI mode and give it a few seconds, and the AI should suddenly track and lock us onto target. So let's just wait a moment. There we go, it's way over there, right, okay. So let's now press the M key to take us back into manual mode. So yeah, I cheated, sorry. But you'll appreciate that when you are actually doing your bombing runs and you've got a very small target in the distance to lock onto, it is extremely difficult to find it initially. And you actually want to lock on as soon as you can, because if you've got your drift and rate adjustments to do, you want as much time to make those adjustments as possible. So I always actually tend to cheat and allow the AI to lock onto the target. And then just focus on manually adjusting drift and rate. So let's go back into search mode and correct for this awful position. Oops, sorry, Shift K, and correct for that awful position we're in there, and get us roughly on target. So Shift K again. So that's pretty close. Now, as I did in the first example, I'm going to adjust for drift first of all. So I'm looking for any movement left or right in this vertical line, and so I'm comparing it against, let's say, this small clump of trees here, and I want to see if this line moves away from that clump of trees or actually starts to move right to and obscure that clump of trees. So far I can't see any movement in that at all, and that looks pretty good. So I don't think we've got any significant drift going on at the moment. Oh no, I tell a lie. I can see it is actually beginning to move over those trees. We've got drift to the right. So I need to go to the instrument view, press the N key, and move that needle to the left a small amount. And that's the only, that's the magnitude of the adjustment I'm going to make. I'm only going to make a small adjustment. Go back to the action view. Move this back onto target by going Shift K to go into search mode. Move it. Joystick around a bit, and then Shift K to lock onto the target again. Now I'm going to double check our drift. Again, we're drifting off to the right. I can see this little green gap here in the trees is getting larger. Go back to the instrument view, and lo and behold, this training mission is cheating once more. It has moved my drift setting. So press N and move it back to 0. As I said in the prior example, in the real missions, it never does this. It never changes your manual setting on here. This is purely a quirk of this training mission, so don't worry about it. And look, right before my very eyes, it cheated on me again. Good grief. So I'm going to press N again and move that back to the 0 point. So A to go back to the action view, Shift K to let search mode and get us back pretty much on target, and Shift K again to come back out of search mode. So let's assume our drift is sorted. Let's have a look at rate. So what we're looking for is any vertical movement up or down in this horizontal line. So again, you can kind of look for any geographical features that you can compare against the vertical line's position and to see if it's moving in relation to the geographical feature on the ground. Now obviously here I've not got anything to compare it against, so it's a bit difficult. As we're so close to the target, the best point of reference now is the target itself. So focus on the target buildings when we can start to see them better, and see if the crosshairs are moving up or down in relation to those buildings. I think so far we are looking not too bad. I don't think the AI has cheated again. We don't seem to be drifting left or right. So I'm not quite happy with that position. So I'm going to go into search mode again, Shift K. Bring it over and Shift K again. Sorry, Shift K. Oh, goodness me. Shift K to get search mode on, and Shift K to turn it off. Fumbling around with the keys on the keyboard there, sorry. So again, monitor this marker here. This marker is your best indication of how much time you have before the bombs will be released. So it's effectively a measurement of how far away from the bomb release that you are. So when these two markers line up, that's when this red release light comes on and the bombs are released. Now we're drifting off to the left, I think, here. So I'm going to go into the instrument view, press the N key and just move that drift marker or the drift needle setting to the right. A to go back into the action view. Now we've actually got quite a bit of time here, so I'm going to go back into search mode and just recenter this on the target. You don't want to do that when these markers are really close. If you are in search mode when the markers are really close together and you come out of search mode, you can actually cause the bombs to drop at the most inopportune moment and you'll really mess things up. So we're drifting off to the right. I key N, holding down N, moving my joystick to the left. Again, the AI cheated and moved that too far over. Now we're really close, so I'm not going to make a rate adjustment. I'm going to push my joystick forward because I think we're drifting, or sorry, the rate movement is too far in the upward direction. That really wasn't the best example, but it's because the AI keeps cheating on the drift adjustment that it throws me. Normally I get my drift adjustments sorted out very early on in the bomb run and I don't need to make changes to them afterwards, and then I can just focus on rate correction. So here, because of the 250 millisecond intervalometer setting, you can see that the bombs are actually all much closer together. The craters are all much closer together and the length of the bomb pattern here is much shorter. So that's a good indication of, if you've got a much smaller target to attack, it's a good indication of why you would want to reduce that intervalometer setting. So if we go to the mission debriefing, yes, we were successful. And again, our bombing pattern, we can see a much shorter line of bombs there. And in this instance, we actually only hit 2 of the intended targets. So that's it. Well, I'm now going to move on to 3 missions which show you the resulting bombing pattern from reduced intervalometer settings down to 100 milliseconds, then down to 10 milliseconds, and then the final one will just be with the salvo switch turned on. So I'm only going to show the video for the final portion of the bomb run. Okay, so here we are on the 3rd example of the training mission. The intervalometer setting is set at 100 milliseconds and we're just approaching the release point. So here we can see the right hand marker is just approaching the left hand marker. There we go, release. So press F6 to go to the bomb drop view. And then F6 again to view the bombing target. So with this we should see a far tighter clustering of the bombs. There we go, you can see they're far closer together and it's a much shorter bombing pattern. And the interesting thing is it always tends to drop the first bombs ahead of the target. So that's just something to bear in mind when you're flying your real bombing missions in the game. So mission debriefing, and we'll go to the graphical view. So again, yeah, tight clustering of the bombs, and we hit 3 of the bombing targets, but they were towards the end of that bombing pattern. So we'll now move on to the 4th example of the training mission. We're going to drop the intervalometer all of the way to its minimum setting now of 10 milliseconds. So here we are on the next example with the intervalometer set at 10 milliseconds. And we're just about to release our bombs on target. There we go, bombs away. So let's take a quick look at the exterior view. And then our bombing target. So we'll see those bombs drop in a very short moment. That'll be a very tight cluster this time. There, bang on target, perfect. So you can see there's absolutely no clustering. Basically all bombs have dropped almost instantaneously on top of each other and have successfully hit the target bang on. So we'll have a quick look in our mission debriefing. We actually took out all 4 of the intended target points, so that's excellent. Anyway, so now we'll move on to the final example where we salvo the bombs. So here we are on the example where I've now set the salvo switch to on, so all bombs will drop instantly, and we can see we're approaching the target and we'll be releasing the bombs very shortly. So we're lined up nicely and we can see we're just targeted on the corner of that building there, and that looked perfectly lined up. Now what's interesting when you salvo, press F6, watch the bombs fall, F6 again. What's interesting with the salvo is, unlike when you set the intervalometer to 10 milliseconds and you actually drop the bombs tightly clustered directly on your target where the crosshairs were, when you salvo, they actually always drop at the point where the first bomb would drop if you had the intervalometer set to a large setting like 250 or 500 milliseconds. So the salvo setting is actually pretty bad, and I really don't recommend that you use it in your missions. So we'll just look at the graphical outcome, and as you can see, even though the target crosshairs were bang on target here, the bombs clustered and dropped way away from the target. So as I say, I recommend do not use the salvo option. If you want to cluster the bombs very tightly, then set your intervalometer to 10 milliseconds, and then at least you know that those bombs will drop where you have the crosshairs. So now let's move on to a final section where I'm going to summarize the results of the bombing missions by doing a comparison of all of the bombing results, along with the final conclusions and recommendations. So now I'm going to summarize the results of the bombing runs, and I'm just going to focus first of all on the 4 cases where we were adjusting the intervalometer setting, and we reduced the intervalometer setting from 500 milliseconds down to its absolute minimum of 10 milliseconds. Now in the first case where we had the default setting of 500 milliseconds, this leads to a very long drawn out bombing pattern, with just under 50% of the bombs falling before where the crosshairs were placed and just over 50% falling after where the crosshairs were placed. And in this training mission scenario where we have a very small kind of point target we're attacking here, only 4 of the bombs fell within this small target area, but nevertheless it was still sufficient to destroy the 4 buildings there. Now, this is nevertheless still a great waste of ordnance, with all the bombs falling afterwards and before being completely wasted. And so in a normal mission you really don't want that to happen, and in a lot of missions you'll see that happen when the intervalometer hasn't been adjusted. You'll see a lot of bombs falling needlessly outside of the actual target area and doing no damage. So although the targets within the game, the actual targets within the missions in the game, are much larger than you'll see on this training mission, the 500 millisecond bombing pattern case is still actually generally much larger than the area of most of the bombing targets that are modeled in the game. So I kind of always recommend, and I do recommend, that you reduce the intervalometer setting below 500 milliseconds, but you need to adjust it based on the size of the target that you're attacking. It's also very dependent on the orientation of the target you're attacking, because if you're attacking a very elongated target and you're flying in from a direction that's going to take you across its width, then you've actually got a very short target to actually bomb, and therefore you need to reduce your intervalometer setting quite significantly to clump the bombs within that short width that you're attacking. Ideally you want to fly along the length of an elongated target, and in which case you can use a longer intervalometer setting. But I would suggest still that the 500 millisecond case is likely still too high, still too long a bombing pattern. I really don't believe there are very many targets, if any, within the game that are actually spaced out over the entire length of the bombing pattern that you see with this intervalometer setting. On the second case, reducing the intervalometer setting to 250 milliseconds led to actually most of the bombs being dropped on the lead up to where the crosshairs were. So this means that if you do reduce the intervalometer setting to this level, you may want to place the crosshairs slightly after the target so that you get around 50% of the bombs falling before and 50% of the bombs falling after where you would ideally like to place the center point. Now, when we reduce the intervalometer setting to 100 milliseconds, we get a very similar case to what we saw in the 250 millisecond case, except this time all of the bombs were dropped on the lead up to and up to the point where the crosshairs were placed. So similarly, again to the 250 millisecond case, I would recommend that you place your crosshairs slightly after the target such that the center point of this bombing run runs directly through before and after the actual target you're trying to destroy. Now, when we reduce the intervalometer setting to its minimum setting of 10 milliseconds, the bombs actually fall in an extremely tight cluster. It's almost like a salvo case. And in this case, they actually fell directly where the crosshairs were placed. So that was fantastic. Now, conversely to that, when you actually use the salvo switch, what you see is that the bombs cluster right at the location where the first bomb fell in the 500 millisecond case. So the bombs all fall extremely short of the intended target, intended by the location of the crosshairs, that is. So I can only recommend that you do not use the salvo switch. If you do want to try and salvo your bombs such that they fall in a very tightly clustered group, then use an intervalometer setting of 10 milliseconds instead of the salvo switch. Now, everything I've said so far, all the conclusions and recommendations are perfectly valid for when you have a single bomber flying on a mission as you are in this training mission. However, when you play the game, when you play any of the normal missions, either in the single mission game or the campaign game, you will be accompanied by 5 other B-17s within your squadron. And your squadron of 6 B-17s all drop bombs and all contribute to damage to the target that you are attacking. So there are a couple of key things to bear in mind here. Firstly, the fact that the B-17s in your squadron are all a little bit offset from one another due to their position within the squadron, then that means that the bombing pattern that is actually achieved on the ground on the target that you're trying to destroy has a width which is roughly equivalent to the width of your squadron. So with your lead plane being in the center, you should bear in mind that you will actually achieve damage both to the left and to the right of the line of attack of your individual B-17 as a lead B-17. The second point is that the intervalometer setting that you can adjust in your lead B-17 will only affect that B-17, the one you are currently controlling. This means that in all of the normal missions that you can play, as well as the historical campaign, where you only ever have control over the lead B-17, that adjusting the intervalometer setting will only have a relatively small impact on the overall bombing pattern that's achieved. That's not to say that it's not worthwhile changing the intervalometer setting, because for instance you can let the other 5 B-17s create a very long, wide bombing pattern, as they normally would, and you can focus on maybe doing a bit of additional damage, maybe in a core area where there may be a lot of 3D targets to destroy, and that may actually help to maximize the overall damage that you achieve to that target. Now, if you're playing a squadron commander campaign, things are a little bit different because you actually can move amongst all 6 of the B-17s within your squadron, and you can individually go to each of the bombardiers and set the intervalometer setting for each of the B-17s. So in theory, you could set up a different intervalometer setting for each of the 6 B-17s within your squadron. Now what this means in practice is that you have the opportunity to compress all of your ordnance from 6 B-17s into your target area. And this is what I would highly recommend that you do. So you need to decide on what intervalometer setting is appropriate for the size of your target, as in where the 3D destructible objects are within that target, and then go to each of the B-17s within your squadron and adjust the intervalometer setting to be the same for each of the 6 B-17s. But as I say, unfortunately, that is not available when you're playing a standard single mission or the historical campaign. And I certainly feel that's a bit of an omission on the part of the developers, in that you should be able to go to your radio operator, for instance, or have something in the radio operator's book that you can click on to say to all of the B-17s in your squadron to change your intervalometer setting to such and such a value. But as I say, unfortunately, that is not available. So that concludes this video. I hope these conclusions and recommendations and the examples I've presented lead you to having greater success on your bombing missions. If you've got any comments, please let me know below. It's always great to get your feedback and your input. If you like the video, please click on the thumbs up below. If you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe. I've got many more of these tutorial videos coming up. And that's it, folks. Thank you very much for watching. Take care, have a good day, and bye-bye.